My name is Cora, and I am 31 years old. When they lowered my husband, Daniel, into the ground, I stood at the edge of the grave with rain freckling my hands, surrounded by the soft rustle of umbrellas and the careful faces of people who knew him from work or from the kind way he held doors. None of my blood stood there with me. No parents, no sister, not even Tessa, my childhood anchor since we were 7 and unafraid of anything. They had all chosen my sister Lauren's engagement celebration across town, the one that had somehow sprawled from a single evening into a weekend spectacle. The first thud of wet earth hit the lid and my phone lit in my pocket. A text from my mother, "We need to talk now." Beneath it, 22 missed calls stacked like accusations. I turned the screen face down. I watched as strangers took turns touching my shoulder. The only hands steady enough to keep me upright were those of Daniel's parents, Maeve and Ronan, who had flown in weeks ago and never once asked me to be strong, only asked where to stand so I wouldn't have to stand there alone. I met Daniel when we were sophomores in college. He skidded into me at the library doorway, scattering my cognitive science textbooks across the terrazzo like someone had dropped a deck of cards mid-trick. He could have muttered sorry and kept moving. Instead, he crouched, stacking the books carefully by size, then looked up with a sheepish smile. "You're going to think this is a terrible line, but can I buy you coffee while I apologize?" Coffee became ramen, became a late movie in a nearly empty theater, became study dates that turned into naps on each other's notebooks, became 5 years of marriage where the ordinary felt like a secret we'd discovered first. He was brilliant in the plain-spoken way that fixes things. He worked nights to pay for his engineering labs, volunteered at the animal shelter on Saturdays, learned the names of mail carriers and janitors, and the barista who never got orders right. He made me laugh like it was medicine and never once treated my ambitions as inconvenient. My family hated him on sight. "You could do better, Cora." My mother, Margaret, would sigh as if the subject exhausted her. "Think of what kind of life you want. He won't be able to provide that." My father, Philip, set down his cutlery and assessed Daniel like a resume. No pedigree, no connections, debt. I'd learned early that in my parents' house, a person's value came embossed in gold foil. Daniel's value arrived in quiet hours and unglamorous kindness. We paid for our tiny wedding ourselves specifically, so we owed no one any favors. They came. They frowned through the toasts. They mispronounced Maeve's name and made a point of being tired before dessert. Lauren, 2 years my junior and always the gravitational center, spent the reception scrolling her phone, snickering about the buffet plates. Tessa, my maid of honor, floated like a shuttle between me and my sister's table, split in loyalties and already drifting. Our marriage was not fashionable or enviable. It was simply good. We rented a small apartment where the bedroom had one window and a stubborn radiator that hissed like a cat. I worked as a marketing coordinator. Daniel joined a renewable energy firm and came home smelling faintly of machine oil and rain. We kept a jar labeled Someday House on the counter and another labeled Trips We Can Barely Afford. We walked the city on Saturdays with cheap coffee steaming in paper cups and made lists on napkins of names we liked for future children, lists we tucked in cookbooks and found months later with grease spots and laughter. But blood has its own gravity. Every holiday with my family felt like a long hallway with pictures of Lauren on every wall. "When are we getting grandchildren?" My mother asked me as if I were withholding inventory. 10 minutes later, she told Lauren, "No rush. Build your career. The right man will come when you're ready." My father interrogated Daniel's promotions as if titles were court verdicts. And Lauren's life, always upgraded, always applauded, unfolded in expensive restaurants and photos with people who used the word network as a verb. Tessa had seen all of this since we were kids. When my parents forgot my high school graduation because Lauren's audition fell on the same night, Tessa sat with me on the curb outside the auditorium and split her granola bar in half like it was communion. "They love you," she'd said back then, "just differently. I wanted to believe there are many kinds of love. I didn't yet know some kinds are simply neglect wearing a nicer dress." 6 months before the funeral, Daniel started complaining about the headaches. We blamed screens and deadlines. Then he collapsed during a dawn run. The ER lights were a cruel white that made everything true too quickly. Stage 4, an aggressive brain tumor. With treatment, months. Without, less. I called my parents from the corridor with a styrofoam cup of water trembling in my hand. "Get another opinion?" my mother said briskly. "Doctors dramatize." I told her we had 3 opinions. She sighed. Well, stay positive. Oh, your sister thinks Bradford is going to propose soon. We might be planning something big. The conversation slid off my life like water off oil. When I told Tessa, she cried with me, swore she'd come by, promised weekends. Then work piled up. Her mother needed her. She had a cold. She'd make it next time. The calls thinned. The calendar didn't. Daniel fought like only gentle people do, with patience and grim humor. Radiology was a storm he let pass through him. Chemo hollowed him out. I took unpaid leave and learned the choreography of caregiving. How to time the anti-nausea meds, how to coax bites of food into a body that wanted nothing, how to clean the things he was ashamed I had to clean. At night, when the monitors beeped like distant satellites and exhaustion crawled under my skin, he would run his thumb over my knuckles and say, "People show up differently in a crisis," as if he needed to make space for them. As if my family's silence required a kindness neither of us owed, his people showed up. Co-workers took shifts. Neighbors dropped off casseroles labeled with reheating instructions. Maeve and Ronan rented a short-term place and lived inside our schedule, washing sheets, telling stories about Daniel's childhood I'd never heard, how he once took apart a toaster to see how it glowed and put it back together better than before. My people sent texts that might as well have been auto-responses. Lauren didn't visit. My parents stopped by once for 27 minutes. My father checked his watch as if time were a billable hour. Tessa came twice, stayed less than an hour, flinched when Daniel vomited, kissed my temple, promised to do better, vanished. Then Lauren got engaged to Bradford, a corporate lawyer with a yacht smile and cufflinks that probably matched his passwords. My mother called sounding 20 years younger. We've booked the club for an engagement party. There are photo ops on the terrace when the light is perfect. Promise you'll be there, sweetheart. Lauren wants you as a bridesmaid. When? I asked, pressing a cold washcloth to Daniel's forehead. 3 weeks from Saturday. The date was a red flare in my mind. Mom, the doctors think we're in the last stretch. I can't leave him. The line went quiet, then cooled. Cora, your sister is only engaged once. He's dying. People die every day. Her voice softened into that terrible, reasonable tone. We all have obligations. Daniel's decline slid faster than any of us could brace for. An experimental treatment we'd pinned hoped to backfired and sent him into seizures. Afterwards, Dr. Petra Singh took me aside, voice gentle, hands steady. We are shifting goals now, to comfort. Hospice is often the most humane path. I nodded as if I knew how to walk without the ground. That night, I dozed in the recliner by his bed and counted his breaths like beads. Our money was threadbare. Insurance argued in long hold music arias. I messaged my father asking if they might help with bills. He wrote back that the engagement party had run over budget, but they'd see next month. I learned that grief has a harder edge when sharpened against contempt. I sent updates to the family chat anyway, hoping information could behave like a key. Michael moved. No, Daniel. Even in memory, I sometimes slip his name into a room where he still lives. Daniel moved to hospice. It could be days. Please come. My mother replied with folded hands emojis and a photograph of Lauren's ring. 6 carats. Tessa texted that she was totally swamped helping with centerpieces and menus, would swing by after the party. No one came. I learned there are silences so loud they rattle the picture frames. On the night before the party, Daniel's breathing changed. The hospice nurse increased the morphine and smoothed his blanket like a blessing. I called my parents. Please, I think it's tonight. I need you. We have guests from out of town, my mother said, annoyed at my bad timing. Lauren will be devastated if we're not here to greet people. I called Tessa. She was at a salon with Lauren, wrapped in foils, laughing. I'm so sorry, Cora. Can I come after? We have a rehearsal dinner. Daniel died at 3:27 a.m. His hands in mine and Maeve's, the room quiet except for the small machine that had learned the rhythm of his lungs. His last words were, "Thank you for loving me." I sat with him until dawn. The men from the funeral home knocked softly and backed away when I said, "Give me one more minute." I pressed my forehead to his and breathed him in, the soap, the morphine, the ghost of machine oil that lived in the seams of his shirts. We chose a simple service. He wanted music and no sermons. We picked a blue ceramic urn because it matched his eyes. I wrote an obituary that felt like trying to bottle weather. I scheduled the funeral for Tuesday, 3 days after he passed, 2 after the party. Surely they'd come when the confetti settled. I emailed directions, texted reminders, created a small event online so no one could say they didn't know. My mother, "We'll try our best. Lauren is exhausted." My father, "We'll check calendar." Lauren, "Tessa, I'll be early to help you set up. Coffee's on me." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe any of them. Tuesday arrived gray, the kind of color that soaks into bone. I put on the black dress that had arrived in a too cheerful shipping bag 2 days before, pinned my hair back because my hands were shaking, and drove. Maeve hugged me so tight my ribs creaked. "We're here," she whispered. "We're not leaving." I checked my phone. 8:15. No Tessa. 8:30. The funeral director asked if I wanted a private moment. I stepped into the quiet room. The flowers were mostly from Daniel's co-workers and from neighbors who'd given me their spare keys once for cat-sitting and now for grief. There was no bouquet from my family. 9 fa bang. Guests arrived. The roommate from college who'd flown in overnight, the barista Daniel tipped embarrassingly well, the project manager who said Daniel's designs would power a neighborhood for decades. At 10's hour, we began. I sat between Maeve and Ronan, acutely aware of the neat row of empty chairs I'd reserved with name cards that looked like a prank. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and unscrolled the paper I'd folded and unfolded until it felt like silk. I told the room about a man who could fix anything except the one thing that mattered, about how love is a toolkit and a shelter and a stubborn, ordinary miracle. As the service ended and we formed a small procession for the cemetery, my phone buzzed. Against my better sense, I glanced down. A social notification. Lauren had posted photos, not from Saturday, but from Monday brunch. Mimosas, a tower of desserts, my parents beaming at Bradford as if he'd been carved from a better tree than the rest of us. In one video, Tessa raised a champagne flute. The caption read, "When family shows up." I put the phone away like it burned. We threaded the narrow lanes of the cemetery. The rain turned gentle. They lowered him and I said the words we'd said every night. "I love you more than yesterday, less than tomorrow." The first spade of earth fell. My phone lit again. "We need to talk now." From my mother, stacked atop a staircase of missed calls from my parents, from Lauren, from Tessa, all within the last hour like they'd discovered time zones. I powered down the screen and watched them cover my husband. When the house fell quiet that evening, I moved through each room as though I were learning the topography of a new country. His sweater over the chair. The note he'd written weeks ago, "Buy more cinnamon," taped to the pantry shelf. I turned my phone back on because I needed to hear nothing from them in order to feel finished with them. The messages poured in. My mother. "So sorry we couldn't make it. Lauren felt unwell after the party. Call us. We're worried." My father. Logistical apologies that sounded like calendar invites. Tessa, a chorus of, "I'm sorry, I overslept, I'm outside your door now, please let me fix this." Lauren. "Sorry about Daniel, busy." I put the phone on the kitchen counter and stared at the dark window until my reflection felt like a stranger. Then an email arrived from Trevor, one of Daniel's colleagues who'd come to the service with eyes that didn't flinch. Subject, "You should see this." He'd been at the Grand Hotel for lunch the day before. He'd filmed something on the terrace because he couldn't believe it and didn't know if he should send it but thought I should decide. A balloon arch framed the scene. My family laughed under it, champagne bright as jewelry. Bradford finished a toast. Lauren stood, tipsy, glittering. "Thank you all for making time," she said, "especially my parents who put this together despite my sister's constant drama." Laughter. Seriously, Cora always has a crisis. First marrying that nothing engineer, then turning his illness into the headline during my engagement. My mother touched her arm, not in correction but fondness. My father nodded. "Cheers to people who show up for what matters," Lauren said. The camera shifted. Tessa, cheeks flushed, clinked glasses and added, "Cora always exaggerates. Remember valedictorian? Her graduation? Everything is a production." My mother's voice drifted across the audio. "She called last night insisting we rush over, on the eve of the party." More laughter. I paused the video with my thumb, the terrace frozen mid-joke, the balloon still. I stood very still and listened to the house listening back. 3 weeks of messages scrolled up my screen. Tessa asking how long the doctors gave us. The next day, Lauren sending a save the date that landed like a blade exactly where the doctors had aimed their warnings. It wasn't an accident, it was a choice. A choreography of cruelty dressed as scheduling. As I was still, the phone chimed again. An email from my parents' account with an attachment. Trust amendment. "We need your signature," my father wrote. "Some updates to the family trust." The timing was so bold it almost felt like satire. I called Naomi, a colleague who had become a friend in the furnace of these months. Her husband, Adrian, practiced estate law. "Don't sign a thing," Naomi said, already forwarding it across their living room. Adrian rang me back 10 minutes later, voice careful. "Cora, this would remove you from the trust entirely and reroute your share to Lauren. They need your signature because the original equal split is still controlling." I thanked him and hung up as my doorbell sounded. The security camera showed 4 shapes on the porch. My parents, Lauren in white as if she were the only bride any world contained, and Tessa in a coat that made her look younger than we were. I stood breathing in and out until my pulse moved from hurricane to tide. Then I opened the door. My mother was the first to speak when I opened the door. "Finally," she said, brushing past me like the house still belonged to her. Lauren followed, the scent of her perfume bleeding into the air, her engagement ring catching the light as if to remind me what mattered now. My father stepped in behind them, briefcase in hand, eyes darting like he was late for a meeting. Tessa hovered in the doorway, clutching a bouquet that looked embarrassed to be there. I didn't invite them to sit, but they made themselves comfortable anyway. My mother taking the couch, Lauren curling beside her, my father setting his briefcase on the coffee table like a centerpiece. "We've been trying to reach you," my mother began, smoothing her skirt. "Ignoring family isn't healthy, Cora. You need to be around people right now." "You mean people who skipped my husband's funeral?" My voice came out steady, though my heart pounded. Lauren rolled her eyes. "Oh God, are we still doing this?" "It's not like you didn't know he was dying for months. You had plenty of time to process." Something inside me cracked, softly like ice giving way. "And I suppose your brunch was urgent?" "It was my engagement celebration," she said sharply. "That's once in a lifetime." "Death is once in a lifetime too," I replied. "Enough." My mother's voice sliced the air. "This bitterness doesn't suit you, Cora. We're here because there are things to discuss." "The trust," my father added, tapping the briefcase. I crossed my arms. "The one you wanted me to sign away last night? The one that cuts me out completely?" They froze. My mother blinked first. "How did you—" "I had it reviewed. By an actual attorney. Unlike the ones Bradford probably finds at cocktail parties." My father's face went pale. "That was private family business." "Private?" I said, laughing bitterly. "You tried to erase me from the family ledger the day after burying my husband." Lauren's patience snapped. "Can we just get this over with? You don't even need the money. Didn't Daniel have life insurance?" Her words hit harder than any slap. Even my parents flinched. "Get out," I whispered. My mother straightened, shocked. "Cora, get out." Louder now, the anger I'd swallowed my whole life rising until I barely recognized my own voice. "You've belittled every choice I've ever made, dismissed every pain I've ever felt, and now, you show up with paperwork like I'm some problem to be managed. You missed his funeral. You mocked him while he was dying. There's nothing left to discuss." Tessa finally spoke. "Please, Cora, I didn't mean—" I turned on her. "You laughed, Tessa, I heard it. You stood there and laughed while they made jokes about us." Tears filled her eyes. "I was trying to keep the peace. You know how your sister is." "No," I said. "You don't keep the peace by betraying the people who love you." Lauren stood, her face flushed red. "You've always been so dramatic. You can't stand that people like me more." I stepped closer until we were nearly face to face. "You're right, Lauren, I can't stand you. But not because people like you more." "I can't stand you because you've never once earned it," my mother gasped. "Cora!" I pointed to the door. "All of you! Leave! Now!" They hesitated until I shouted again, years of swallowed humiliation erupting at once. "Get out!" My father gathered his briefcase, muttering something about regrettable behavior. Lauren stormed past me, muttering unhinged. My mother lingered, her mask of superiority slipping into something raw. "You'll regret this, young lady," she said. When the grief fades, you'll need us. I met her eyes. I needed you yesterday. I opened the door wider. Goodbye, Margaret. Her name, not Mom. Her face faltered. Then she turned, heels clicking like punctuation as she left. When the door finally shut, the silence was staggering. I leaned against it, shaking, tears and laughter mixing in some strange release. The room was empty, but for the first time it was mine. That night I called Naomi, voice trembling but clear. I did it, I said. I told them to leave. Good, she said softly. Now you can start living your life, not theirs. In the days that followed, the phone rang, but I stopped answering. My parents left voicemails about forgiveness and healing as a family. Lauren sent a text, "You're being ridiculous, apologize." Tessa wrote long emails filled with guilt and explanations that all sounded the same. I didn't mean to. I didn't reply to any of them. I wasn't cruel. I was done. I started therapy with Dr. Weller, who specialized in grief and trauma. The first thing she said was, "You've suffered 2 losses, your husband and your family. Both deserve mourning." For weeks, I barely spoke. She told me silence was okay. Healing had its own language. 3 weeks after the funeral, I joined a widow's support group. 8 women of different ages, each carrying invisible weights. There was Maria, who had lost her husband in an accident, Janet, whose partner had died during surgery, and Sarah, 35, whose husband's sudden heart attack had shattered her world. Sarah was blunt, irreverent, alive in a way I wasn't yet. After the meeting, she took me for coffee and said, "For the first 2 months, I didn't wear real clothes. Then one day I showered. That was my big victory. Start small." So I did. One small thing a day. A shower, a meal that wasn't cereal, a walk. Daniel's parents checked in constantly, but gently. Maeve sent soup recipes. Ronan fixed the leaky faucet Daniel had meant to get to. "You'll always be our daughter," Maeve said once. We lost a son, not a daughter-in-law. Her kindness was both comfort and ache. My parents, meanwhile, kept their distance except for the occasional email. My mother wrote about reconciliation. Lauren's engagement had imploded. Bradford caught in a financial scandal, his family pulling back. She blamed stress. My father's health was declining, she said, and I should visit before it's too late. I didn't. I'd said my goodbyes already, to Daniel and to them. Months passed. I began writing again, first in a journal, then online. A blog about grief, resilience, and what family really means. The posts found readers, other people who'd been abandoned in their hardest hours. Their comments became a kind of lifeline. 6 months after Daniel's death, I found a sealed letter in his nightstand. The handwriting was shaky. "My dearest Cora, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Please don't let this break you. You have always been stronger than you believe. You've spent your whole life trying to be seen by people who refuse to look. Stop waiting for them. Build something new. Find joy, even if it feels like betrayal at first. You deserve to live. D." I held the letter until the ink blurred with tears. It wasn't a goodbye, it was permission. That became my new beginning. 1 year later, the ache was still there, but it had softened into something I could carry without collapsing under its weight. I had sold the apartment Daniel and I once called home. Every corner of it had been a museum of before, and I realized I needed a space that didn't whisper memories every time I turned on a light. I bought a small townhouse near a park, the kind of place Daniel and I used to daydream about but never thought we could afford. It had a little backyard and a single cherry tree that bloomed pink clouds in spring. My days began to find rhythm again. I volunteered twice a week at the cancer ward where Daniel had been treated, sitting with patients during chemo, listening when they wanted to talk, staying silent when they didn't. At first it was agony, but over time I realized it was healing. I wasn't running from the pain anymore. I was using it to build something gentle. Through that volunteer work, I met a couple named Frank and Elaine, whose son had died 5 years earlier. They were warm, unpretentious, the kind of people who never pretended grief had an expiration date. They started inviting me over for Sunday dinners, insisting I bring nothing but an appetite. "You remind us of our boy," Elaine told me once, "and we'd like to think he'd want us to keep taking care of someone who needed it." I didn't correct her. Maybe she was right. By the second year, my blog had grown. What started as late-night journaling had turned into a community. People shared stories of loss, toxic families, and rebuilding. I realized my voice had power, not because it was loud, but because it was honest. Writing about Daniel, about cutting ties with people who should have loved me, didn't just free me. It helped others name their own pain. Then one afternoon, I got an email that made my hands go cold. Subject line, family emergency. It was from my mother. Your father has had a heart attack. Rachel's wedding is postponed. We need your help with medical expenses. Please call. For a long time, I stared at it, waiting for the old reflex, the need to fix things, to rush in, to be the dutiful daughter. But the panic never came. Instead, I looked up the hospital listed in the email. He'd survived, the news said. Stable condition. Lauren's engagement, it turned out, had collapsed when her fiancé was caught up in a fraud investigation. Everything they'd once prized, status, control, image, was unraveling. I didn't reply. But I did something kinder than vengeance. I sent her links to medical aid foundations, low-interest payment plans, and support programs. No greeting, no signature, just information. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk under the cherry tree. Months later, Sarah from my support group ran into Tessa at a coffee shop. She asked about you, Sarah told me. Said she misses you but doesn't expect forgiveness. I didn't answer right away. Part of me still stung when I thought of her laughter in that video, but another part, smaller, quieter, felt tired of carrying resentment like armor. Maybe someday, I said. But not now. Spring came again, the second anniversary of Daniel's death. I took the day off, packed a picnic basket, and drove to the cemetery. The air was cool, the grass vivid. I placed new flowers by his headstone and sat on the bench I'd placed there months earlier. 2 years, I said aloud, tracing his name with my fingertips. Sometimes it feels like you just left. Other times like you were never here at all. But I still feel you, in the way I laugh now, in the way I don't apologize for taking up space anymore. A shadow crossed the path. When I looked up, Tessa was standing there, clutching a small bouquet of white lilies. She froze when our eyes met. I can come back, she said quickly. It's okay, I replied, surprising myself. You can put them down. She knelt, arranged her flowers beside mine, and stepped back. I come every year, she said quietly. It doesn't make up for what I did. I just needed to say I was sorry somewhere he could hear it too. I studied her face. The sharp, confident Tessa I'd once known was gone. This woman looked humbled, human. How have you been? I asked. Different, she said with a half smile. I stopped chasing people who only love the version of me that's convenient. Rachel and I don't talk anymore. She wanted me to take her side in everything, and I just couldn't keep pretending she was right. I exhaled slowly. I'm sorry it came to that. I'm not, she said. I needed to lose the wrong people to see how wrong I'd been. I miss you, Cora. And I know sorry doesn't rebuild 20 years, but I wanted you to hear it anyway. Her voice trembled on the last words, and for the first time in a long time, I believed her. Thank you, I said softly. That means more than you think. We talked for a while about life, therapy, grief, the ways we'd both changed. Before she left, she said, He'd be proud of you, you know. Daniel, you're living exactly how he wanted you to. After she walked away, I sat in the silence, the kind that felt full, not empty. That night, I hosted dinner at my house. Around the table sat the people who had shown up when no one else did. Sarah and her boyfriend, Elaine and Frank, Naomi and Adrian. We ate, laughed, cried a little, remembered Daniel. It wasn't the family I was born into, but it was the family I chose. Later, after everyone left, I stepped into my garden under a canopy of stars. The air smelled of earth and new beginnings. I looked up and whispered, You were right, Daniel. I'm stronger than I ever knew. The wind stirred the branches of the cherry tree, petals drifting down like quiet applause. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. If you've ever been abandoned by the people who should have loved you, know this. You can build something better. Family isn't blood. Family is the people who stay when it's hardest to, the ones who listen when the world turns its back. Tell me, Have you ever had to walk away from someone who kept hurting you? How did you find the strength to let go? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you believe healing is possible, no matter how much you've lost. Because sometimes the life you deserve begins where the old one ends.